The bottom line when you're choosing cooking methods and utensils is that if you have the right tools and the right equipment, it can make the difference between making it easy to get a job done and safe or making it more challenging. So my hope is to, whether you do this on your own or commercially, that you spend your money wisely. The National Sanitation Foundation, which is what NSF stands for, is an international organization that sets standards for the design and construction and specifications for food service equipment, both large equipment and small equipment. This is what their seal looks like. If you buy a piece of equipment for your commercial establishment, you really do want to look for this. It means that it meets these following standards, and this may be a stamp in metal, it may be a seal that's affixed, it could be different sizes, but essentially it's been approved by the National Sanitation Foundation if this seal appears. These are some of the criteria: cleanliness, ease of cleanliness, food contact surfaces are non-toxic. There are occasionally bowls and pans and things that are brought in from Mexico and South America that sometimes have greater levels of lead than what are safe here in the United States, or safe anywhere actually, but what are allowed here. So it's those kinds of things that the NSF looks out for. Also, it looks for surfaces that don't have cracks and crevices and places where soil can accumulate. If there are corners, they should be rounded so that they can be easy to clean rather than creased, and that coating materials must be non-toxic and must also be easy to clean and resist chipping and cracking. Also, that last sentence is that waste and waste liquids must be easy to remove, because there's a lot of equipment that has to be cleaned in place. We won't really deal with that much in this class, but if you have to go on and take 343 and 344, we'll talk more about stationary or clean-in-place equipment. The idea is before you buy something new for your personal kitchen or for your department, is decide if the equipment is necessary for producing the menu items that you plan to produce. Will the equipment do the job? Is it the most economical for the operation that you have? It may be the most technologically advanced, but it may not be what you need for your job. And is it easy to clean and to maintain? Hand tools are what we use. We've already talked about knives in class for cutting and shaping, moving like a spatula, and combining foods. Generally, they don't have moving parts. Knives are probably the single most important tool in the kitchen, and a good knife begins with a single piece of metal, either stamped or cut or forged and tempered from a larger piece of metal. This is a typical diagram of the parts of a knife. You can see them, and some of them may make sense, but there may also be some new vocabulary there for you. This would be prudent if you would learn these different terms and which parts of the knife they apply to. The blade is typically either carbon steel, stainless steel, high carbon steel, or ceramic. Most are carbon steel or steel of one type. Carbon steel is what we for a long time used, but they hold an edge very nicely, but they tend to rust. Stainless steel is what most of our knives are that we have in lab. They're very inexpensive. They are sharp and can be sharpened, but they don't have the durability of keeping an edge that a carbon steel or a high carbon steel knife has. High carbon steel has the benefit of the sharp edge maintained like the carbon steel knife, but because of its alloy with chrome and other metals, it also doesn't rust. And that's when you see a knife set sold in a department store or at Costco, normally that's a high carbon steel knife. There are also ceramic knives that are made to hold a very sharp edge and be somewhat durable, but again, they are ceramic and not necessarily a solid piece of metal, or sometimes it's ceramic over metal, and so they may not have the same durability. They're quite expensive, but they are also a very nice tool to use. These are the list of the most common shapes, and I'm going to show them to you. This is the chef's knife. This is, if you look at the proportion, this is probably a pretty long chef's knife, maybe even a 12 or a 14 inch. Probably not the most common length for someone to have in their home. A boning knife has a large, durable handle, very much like a chef's knife, but the blade is very narrow so that you can cut in and around the bones of beef or pork or lamb or chicken. A paring knife, and again, this is a little bit not proportional to the others. As we saw in lab, paring knives are a little smaller. You can hold them in your hand and work with them. Blade tends to be 3 to 4 inches in length. Cleaver, I've never owned a cleaver at home. I use them in lab sometimes, but I have not found them to be necessarily necessary in a home kitchen. If you did a lot of hunting, perhaps, or maybe there are particular types of cooking that you're interested in, you might want a cleaver. But I've cooked lots of years without ever owning one of these. But in commercial environments, they're much more common. A slicer comes in two forms. This would be a slicer that you might use on meat products. This is probably the most common type of slicer that we use on bread or cakes, so that it has that serrated edge and doesn't cause damage to the tender crumb of a slice of bread or cake. Butcher knife or a scimitar, again similar, the handle and the initial part of the blade, but it has this broad tip, again, that's normally used for breaking down carcasses of beef, so something only that would be used in a more commercial environment. These are things that we use to sharpen knives, to keep an edge on knives, and I forgot to demonstrate how to sharpen, but I will happily show you that anytime you want to know. This is a sharpening stone on the top. We have one in Kitchen 3. It has 3 edges, 3 surfaces on it, in increasing degree of, goes from rough to very smooth to put a nice edge on a knife. And then the steel at the bottom, a sharpening steel, is more likely to be what you might find at home. That also helps keep an edge on a knife, but probably you'll need to take your knife in to a knife sharpener maybe once or twice a year, or more often if you do a lot of cooking or working with a knife. And then finally, I just want to review the different tools that we use for measuring. Scales are obviously necessary when you're going to weigh ingredients. Volume measures are critically important when you're going to measure by volume. And again, the 2 units on the right would be dry measures, and then the measuring cups to the left that have the Pyrex writing on them, those would be liquid measures, and they come in different sizes from 1 cup up even to 1 gallon. We'll pause here and come back in just a minute.